400 years of silence. 400 years since Joseph, the favored son of Jacob, saved Egypt from a devastating famine and brought his family to dwell in the fertile land of Goshen. What began as a refuge for a single family had blossomed into a great nation within a nation. The children of Israel multiplied, growing strong and numerous. But the favor they once knew had curdled into fear. A new Pharaoh arose, one who did not remember Joseph. He saw not a blessed people, but a potential threat, a foreign multitude that might one day rise against him. And so, the lash fell. The Israelites were forced into brutal slavery, their days filled with the grueling labor of building treasure cities for Pharaoh. They cried out under the weight of their bondage, their groans reaching to the heavens. Yet, their numbers only grew. In his cruel paranoia, Pharaoh decreed an unspeakable horror. Every newborn Hebrew boy was to be thrown into the Nile River. The hope for a future, for a deliverer, seemed to be drowning in the murky waters. But God had a plan, woven into the very fabric of this tragedy. One mother, Jochebed, defied the king's order. She placed her beautiful baby boy in a waterproof basket and set him adrift among the reeds of the Nile, praying for a miracle. And a miracle she received. The baby was found by none other than Pharaoh's own daughter. She had compassion on him, named him Moses, meaning drawn from the water, and raised him as a prince of Egypt. Moses grew up surrounded by the splendors of the Egyptian court, yet he never forgot who he was. One day, he saw an Egyptian mercilessly beating one of his Hebrew brethren. In a flash of rage, he struck the Egyptian down. His act of justice, born of compassion, was discovered. Fearing for his life, Moses fled Egypt, escaping into the desolate wilderness of Midian. There, the prince became a shepherd, a fugitive hiding from his past. He married, had a son, and for 40 years, he lived a quiet life. His royal past a distant memory. The cries of his people in Egypt seemed a world away. One day, while tending his flock near Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, Moses witnessed an astonishing sight. A bush engulfed in flames, yet not consumed. As he drew closer, a voice boomed from the fire, calling his name. It was the voice of God, the God of his fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God declared that he had seen the misery of his people and heard their cries. He had come down to rescue them and bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey. And Moses, the hesitant shepherd, the fugitive prince, was to be his instrument. God commanded him to go back to Egypt, to stand before the mighty Pharaoh and declare, "Let my people go." Moses was filled with doubt. Who was he to confront the most powerful man on earth? He made excuses. He wasn't a good speaker. They wouldn't believe him. But God equipped him with sins a staff that would become a serpent, a hand that could become leprous and then clean again. And he gave him a helper, his own brother, Aaron, who would be his mouthpiece. Reluctantly, Moses obeyed. He returned to the land of his birth, a humble shepherd armed only with a staff and the word of God, to challenge an empire. Standing before Pharaoh, Moses and Aaron delivered God's command, but Pharaoh's heart was hard. "Who is the Lord," he scoffed, "that I should obey him?" In his arrogance, he not only refused but increased the Israelites' burdens, forcing them to make bricks without straw. The people's suffering intensified, and they blamed Moses. But God's judgment was about to be unleashed. A terrifying series of 10 plagues descended upon Egypt, each one a direct challenge to the gods of the Nile. The river turned to blood, killing the fish and fouling the water. Hordes of frogs swarmed the land, followed by swarms of gnats and flies. A pestilence struck down the livestock of the Egyptians, while Israel's animals were spared. Boils afflicted the people. A devastating hailstorm, mixed with fire, rained from the sky, destroying crops and shattering everything in its path. An immense swarm of locusts devoured whatever the hail had left. A suffocating darkness, so thick it could be felt, covered Egypt for 3 days. A darkness that did not touch the homes of the Israelites in Goshen. With each plague, Pharaoh's magicians were proven powerless. Pharaoh would plead with Moses, promised to let the people go, only to harden his heart once the plague was lifted. He was in a battle of wills with the creator of the universe, and he was losing. Finally, God announced the 10th and most terrible plague. At midnight, the angel of death would pass through Egypt, and the firstborn son in every household would die from the firstborn of Pharaoh on his throne to the firstborn of a slave in the dungeon. But God provided a way of escape for his people. He instructed each Israelite family to take a perfect lamb, slaughter it, and paint its blood on the doorposts of their homes. When the angel of death saw the blood, he would pass over that house. They were to roast the lamb and eat it in haste, with their sandals on and their staffs in hand, ready to leave at a moment's notice. This was the first Passover. That night, a great cry went up throughout Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. But in Goshen, protected by the blood of the lamb, the Israelites were safe. A shattered Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night. "Go," he commanded. "Leave my people. Take your flocks, your herds, everything, and go." And so, after 430 years, the children of Israel, now a nation of over 2 million people, marched out of Egypt. They did not leave empty. The Egyptians, desperate for them to go, gave them silver, gold, and clothing. The long night of slavery was over. Freedom had come, led by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. They journeyed toward the wilderness, but their freedom was short-lived. Once again, Pharaoh's heart hardened. Regretting the loss of his slave labor, he mustered his army, his finest chariots, and pursued them. The Israelites found themselves trapped, the Red Sea before them, and Pharaoh's army closing in behind. Fear turned to panic. They cried out to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" But Moses stood firm in his faith. "Do not be afraid," he declared. "Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then, at God's command, Moses stretched his hand out over the sea. All that night, a strong east wind blew, parting the waters and turning the seabed into dry ground. The Israelites walked through the sea on a dry path, with walls of water towering on their right and on their left. The Egyptian army charged after them into the heart of the sea. But once the last Israelite was safely on the other side, Moses stretched out his hand again. The walls of water collapsed, crashing down upon the chariots and horsemen. The entire army of Pharaoh was swallowed by the sea. Not one of them survived. As the sun rose, the Israelites saw the bodies of their enemies washed up on the shore. They were truly free, and they sang a song of praise to the Lord, a song of deliverance and victory. Their journey, however, was far from over. They entered the vast and unforgiving wilderness of Sinai. The initial euphoria of freedom quickly gave way to the harsh realities of desert life. They grumbled for water, and God provided it from a rock. They complained of hunger, and God sent manna from heaven, a mysterious bread that appeared with the morning dew, and quail in the evening. For 40 years, their clothes and sandals would not wear out. God was teaching them to depend on Him for their every need. 3 months after leaving Egypt, they arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai. The mountain was covered in a thick cloud, with thunder, lightning, and the sound of a trumpet. God descended upon the mountain in fire, and the people trembled. Here, God made a covenant with Israel. He called Moses up the mountain and gave him the 10 Commandments, the moral foundation for their new nation, written by the very finger of God on 2 tablets of stone. He also gave them laws for worship and for civil life, including the instructions for building a tabernacle, a portable sanctuary where God's presence would dwell among them. This was their highest moment, a nation chosen by God, given His law, and promised His presence. The story of Exodus is more than just a historical account. It is the ultimate story of redemption. It's a story of a God who hears the cries of the oppressed, who judges evil, and who powerfully saves His people. From slavery to freedom, from bondage to covenant, Exodus reveals the mighty hand of a God who moves heaven and earth to set His people free. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more epic narratives.